strategic planning is a lifestyle, and I think family is key. We are a nation of hard workers, a nation of talented people, creative. I believe if one determines, one must learn.
Hello, my name is Dalal Iriqat. Welcome to Dialogue channel. Today I have a very interesting guest, Dr. Dalal Iriqat. She's a Vice President of International Relations Department and Assistant Professor at Arab American University in Palestine. Dalal is a weekly columnist in Al-Quds newspaper. In the former times, she served as a senior advisor to Prime Minister on strategic communications. Dalal has many publications on different topics such as diplomacy, coercive diplomacy, public diplomacy, nation branding, soft power mediation, and conflict resolution. She has a PhD Public Administration of Paris Sorbonne, Master of Diplomatic Studies at Westminster University, and Bachelor of Political Science from the University of Jordan. I would like to admit that this is far away from being a full list of her achievements. Hello, Dalal. Thank you very much for your time and for this interview. My first question to you, as you are a person, when I read about your career path, you have so many titles and achievements. My question is, when people ask you what is your profession, what do you answer?
Thank you very much, Diana. Well, I'm a professor in the university.
Okay, that sounds very short. When I read everything what you have achieved, that's pretty modest. When was the moment in your life when you really understood with which path you would like to connect your career?
Well, growing up in Palestine, I realized a while ago, if I may say, that I have a responsibility towards my society and Palestine in general. After finishing my master's degree, let's say, and then coming back for a while in Palestine, working at Vise University, and then finishing my PhD and coming back again to pursue on my academic career, I realized a year later that I want my impact or my influence to reach as much youth, Palestinian youth, as it could, for two reasons. Because I saw diplomacy and I saw education as two basic essential tools for the Palestinian people. And then my goal of branding Palestine came along as I started writing my weekly columns with the Quds newspaper. So with my educational career, teaching in the university, and with my column writing in the Quds newspaper, I wanted to achieve my dream, my passion about branding Palestine.
Okay. And as education takes a very big part of your life, I mean, you studied yourself in many universities and now you're a professor. I'm very curious to ask you, as now the world is changing so quickly and we live in the time of digitalization. So how does it influence education? Does education need some kind of modernization in order to adapt to this new reality, let's say?
Well, Palestinian higher education suffers from the Israeli occupation and its limitations on the ground, of course. Palestine does not suffer lack of human resources or brains. I mean, we do face setbacks in our financial resources. However, the world needs to know that it is the Israeli visa and mobility restrictions that hinder our capacity to compete internationally. It is the Israeli limitations that stand as a major obstacle in our strategic planning to rise and become more visible and effective internationally. In Palestine, as I mentioned, I have realized, and I think the majority had realized, that education is our way out. And here we need to, as you said, adopt adaptive leadership in higher education, which means adaptive leadership in higher education means that Palestine should not cope with the Israeli occupation racist policies. However, we need to work on constructively developing the Palestinian higher education institutions, which are expected to exercise adaptive creative leadership, where all terminologies of innovation, entrepreneurship, robotics, STEM, STEAM, artificial intelligence, virtual exchanges, webinars need to be part of the way of thinking for leaders in Palestinian universities. So yes, digital tools are very much needed, and we have to be thinking about adopting them into our educational system.
Yes, we need to be up to date. Yes, and talking about the information, nowadays information became a dangerous weapon, and we have so much information, and usually people share it, and sometimes even not checking the resources, not analyzing them. Is it something that should be in the program of universities to teach students of this self-responsibility, that they know if they share something, they should be sure that this is a real information?
We need to embrace skills, and this requires work on the awareness of the public on such important matters, given the immense data that is spread everywhere. Analytical skills and the responsibility of inquiry. Climbing the ladder of inference, and the responsibility of research and inquiry before jumping to conclusions. Unfortunately, in a relatively recent poll among Palestinian youth, which was conducted by the JMCC, it showed that around 80% of the Palestinian youth tend to generalize, and I think this is due to the lack of proper upraising and the improper education system. And I truly believe if we raise the generations to respect inquiry and positive curiosity, to focus on skills, communication skills, life skills, this should be our priority. This means, shifting from the conventional to the modern way of education, where data analysis becomes a discipline of teaching. We at the Arab American University, for example, we have a very new program, a master's program in data analysis. Because, as you know, information is everywhere. We all have, the smart devices. We could get to the pieces of information in seconds. But the way we link this information, the way we bring it together, the way we analyze it and construct analysis out of it is what really matters.
Right. Yeah, this is like kind of what I always think, that it's important to give education, but it's also emotional intelligence that is so important for the students, right? This is the feature that nowadays, you can't live without it. You can be very professional, but these skills of diplomacy or emotional intelligence are so necessary. And talking about the information, as we mentioned that you are a weekly columnist in Al-Quds newspaper. What are the main topics of your articles, and what is the main goal?
Thank you, Diana. Well, let me start with emotional intelligence, and I totally agree with what you said. I strongly believe that emotional intelligence is somehow natural. However, since it is a field of study right now, it's being taught all around, I believe if one determines, one must learn. One shall learn. Exactly like leadership. For example, many people, and myself, I believe that leadership is something that we are born with certain skills, certain charisma for leadership that we come to this life with. However, we've seen and we're witnessing a lot of programs, training, diplomas, and master's degrees in leadership. And this also applies to emotional intelligence. So with its psychological angle, the values, the principles, charisma, and empathy, I think if one really determines, one can learn. Coming to my weekly columns, I try to choose the most sensitive issues, politically speaking. However, I do tend sometimes to tackle certain social issues, but usually my topics are the most sensitive ones. And the goal behind choosing such topics is basically to try to raise awareness among youth on those matters which I think are important to our nation and to Palestine in general. And what makes my columns different is the simple language that I try to use into my columns to make sure that I reach a largest audience, no matter of what academic or educational level they reach.
Okay, now that's interesting. I've seen a report of UNESCO about participation of women in science and research, and it was told that Palestinian women have quite good positioning, like comparing especially with their neighborhood countries. So it gives a good image, and I know actually a lot of active Palestinian women. But I'm very curious, you as a woman in your region, did you have to face some kind of challenges?
Having given the privilege of being born in Jerusalem and being raised in Palestine, well, any Palestinian, no matter if it's a woman, male or female, I mean, we face a lot of challenges towards building up our careers, decent careers under occupation. So
Sure.
if it's that difficult and that challenging for men, everybody can imagine how it would look for a woman. I mean, politically and culturally speaking, this has not been easy, not for me and not for any successful career woman that I know. When a woman manages to make a family and a career, then unfortunately she is put under some kind of surveillance of society, of how she is managing the balance between the household, the family, and the career. So it does put a lot of pressure. It is difficult to describe it. However, I think any human being at a certain stage of our life, we reach a certain point where we are aware of what really matters. And once we reach that point of identifying what really matters, what we need to care or more or less about, when women reach that point, they will continue to suffer maybe culturally, but they will be able to counter back, to have that mindset that shall influence all angles of their life. So yes, it's very important that we are aware, we acknowledge that the challenges, and we reach that point where we can decide for ourselves what really matters.
Okay, thank you. And talking about diplomacy, as it takes a big part in your research, and I mean, you have got your master's degree in diplomatic studies, and it's focused on coercive diplomacy. I'm very curious because I didn't hear about coercive diplomacy before. And can you please tell a bit more about that? What it is, what is it about?
So coercive diplomacy presents a demonstrative manner in controlled increments to induce the opponent to revise calculations and agree to a mutually acceptable termination of the conflict. This is the theoretical definition of coercive diplomacy. However, if I want to explain it in simple words for all the audience to get an idea of what coercive diplomacy is, it's part of the carrot and stick approach that is used in political science. It's a political diplomatic strategy, not a military one. So it's used for resolving or reconciling conflicts or misunderstandings of interest with the opponent. However, I think there is need to develop this theory of coercive diplomacy, which I strongly believe that, and I did some studies on mediation and negotiations, and I took the Camp David too, the year 2000 as a case study of mediation, and I found out that it was not really the role of the mediator or the broker, the honest broker or the third party mediator that the US administrations were truly employing in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. On the contrary, it was coercive diplomacy. Palestinians were always coerced. I mean, coercive diplomacy was implemented on the Palestinians by the Israelis with the support of the Americans. When we talk about coercive diplomacy in general, away from the Palestinian-Israeli case, we could look at the different sanctions, and mainly economic sanctions that are being imposed on different regions. We hear it when we talk about Iran, when we talk about Russia and Ukraine. So this is political, economic, and legal sanctions are a big example of coercive diplomacy, where one country coerces the other country diplomatically, not with the use of force, but to make them give up or concede to their demands.
Very often we see that diplomats are using the same tools as like signing peace accords, agreements, conferences, But unfortunately, we see that in the reality, they are not often being followed. What do you think? What is the main problem of that? Why is it like this?
Very much, Diana. I mean, this is a dilemma that I usually face with my students when I teach the module of diplomacy. And here, allow me to introduce that the diplomacy has an old definition and a new definition for diplomacy. Old diplomacy is basically the messengers and the ambassadors who, for centuries, were responsible for the representation and the exchange of letters and communications between the respective nation states at that time. New diplomacy does not only include those ambassadors or those messengers, but also it includes the nationals. New diplomacy, contemporary diplomacy involves public diplomacy, media diplomacy, digital diplomacy, and this also could be broken down into the Twitter diplomacy, for example, or the social media diplomacy in general. The main reason that diplomacy is not necessarily always guaranteed is because it is all based on international law. And here comes the question of what do we prioritize and what is more influential, diplomacy or international law. And here I must mention that diplomacy itself is based on international law, and I name the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of 1961, the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, 1963. Even in Palestine, we have the Palestinian Diplomatic Law, which was issued in 2005. So to answer your question, it is very important to raise the question of the feasibility of the enforcement of international law. Unfortunately, international law is not binding unless it is under Article 7 of the UN Charter, which allows the use of force to implement peace and security. Here, I should mention the question is related to also universal values, respect of rights, which is now up to each state, up to each nation to respect or simply just ignore. So we look at the case of Israel, for example, and we witness the impunity that the occupying state continues to enjoy. This can explain the question of diplomacy versus.
Yes, thank you. Now, in some of your posts, you mentioned the necessity of self-responsibility. And do you think that this is a key to a healthy society? That each person really is aware that, this is a self-responsibility that it has to hold in order to build up their lives?
I'm a strong believer that we as individuals were born for a reason. So we're not here to live and die only. However, this simple realization needs to be deeply emphasized in one's relation to society. There is a need to raise this awareness on this topic, to try to remind every individual of her and his responsibility towards oneself to start with, and then towards the society, in order to bring along collective change in the societies that we live. We should stop the practice of waiting for policies to change. Of every individual needs to acknowledge responsibility towards positive change, of course, in the society. Values of honesty, respect, responsibility need to be embraced. We don't really need religion to realize that human rights need to prevail at the end of the day. Every human is designed to be able to differentiate between black and white. It is as simple as that. And so I strongly believe individuals, if determined, can definitely bring about positive change into society, not only on health levels, as I mentioned in my post, but also on the political, economic, social, and personal level.
Yes. Thank you. You've mentioned about the Maslow's pyramid. So I will put some more information about it in our video for those people that don't know what is that. So it's like a pyramid of needs, right? And of humans' motivation. What do you think, is it connected, the conditions where people are growing up? Is there a correlation of conditions where they grow up and their way to this pyramid, let's say, how they are motivated to achieve all these, let's say, basic needs?
Thank you. Well, Maslow has introduced a pyramid of needs. It's for basically human needs theory, which talks about the food, the shelter, and one of the needs on the top of the pyramid that Maslow had identified was self-esteem. And this is what I want to focus on in answering your question, Diana. Self-esteem is a basic human need. Every human being needs recognition. And this also includes appreciation, autonomy, affiliation, status and role. And this brings me to the book of Daniel Shapiro, who wrote about emotions in difficult situations and negotiations. In Palestine, we face tremendous exceptional challenges and difficulties on a daily basis. So if we manage to plant this understanding of one's responsibility towards bringing positive change, if we focus on shifting the weaknesses to strengths, if we determine to analyze our reality of opportunities, of course, and threats with resilience, determination, the stamina, Palestinians can live they cannot live without resilience, without optimism, without positive thinking. So yes, of course, the needs differ from a society to another. Given our political reality, Palestinians do have the basic needs and enjoy the shared basic needs with other people, like food and shelter, as I mentioned, and security. But also we need to reach the need of self-esteem in different levels.
During the time of the virus now, we all had to learn to live here and now. You as a specialist in strategic planning, what is your advice to people nowadays? How is it possible to still live here and now, but also effective to make an effective planning for the future? Where to find this balance?
Well, strategic planning for me is not a discipline of study alone. Strategic planning is a lifestyle. And this is what I try to tell my students. I really hope that we come into a point where we realize that strategic planning should be adopted as a lifestyle on the personal level, career level, our family issues. I mean, because strategic planning is basically about our dreams, about our vision, about our goals that are based on our values. And this means if we want to translate our dreams and vision and goals, we need to stick to certain time frames and certain guidelines, of course, guided by KPIs, which are the key performance indicators that will show us if we are working on the right track, if this needs re-evaluation or no, if this needs some OODA looping, which means evaluation and reconsidering of the decisions or goals that we have set. And the most important thing for us to realize in learning strategic planning as a lifestyle is that doing a SWOT analysis is something too basic for us to be adopting on all different levels to identify our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is not only to identify those strengths and weaknesses, but it means analyzing our reality, because one's reality is of course a combination of different weak points and strong points, threats and opportunities. So how do we understand, how do we analyze this reality internally and externally? Does really determine how we are able to change those weaknesses into strengths, or making use of the opportunities at hand and converting them into strengths. So this has been a topic that I focused on during the coronavirus, COVID-19. And I have spoken about strategic planning vis-a-vis the government approach in countering and dealing with the pandemic. However, some we at the individual level or the government level might be able to implement the steps of strategic planning accordingly, but unless we reach the evaluation phase, the evaluation stage, and we're honest to objectively evaluate and reconsider, strategic planning will not be effective. So yes, we did employ strategic planning, but I think there were some setbacks which really needed evaluations and reconsideration.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting. And talking about you as a person, you're an inspiring model for many because you have achieved a lot of things in your life, and you actually combine your career, your private life, your family. And I'm very curious, how do you find the balance to keep your energy on the high level? And how do you actually manage this, or what are your tools?
So my tools to manage between career, productivity, and my life. I do have a couple of tools to share. I have a great family, and I think family is key. I was lucky to choose, lucky and wise, to choose a matching partner who would help me embark on this balance of career and family. Plus, I have a twin sister. Imagine that a twin sister is it means in terms of supporting a family. My parents were behind all the stamina and determination that I was raised with. I'm very proud of this family, my kids, my husband, my parents, and my siblings, who were, this keeps me moving ahead in my life. However, I also do meditate, and my meditation is a bit different, because my meditation is basically in my hobby, which is horseback riding, music, cycling, so basically exercising outdoors. It is very, very important. It's a very important tool for me to keep sane living in Palestine. And I hope you get me right, because living here is very, very challenging. Experiencing occupation, the checkpoints, having to raise kids and work in those very complicated, day-to-day details. One really needs to do something different. I mean, some people tend to meditate with religious or spiritual, soul-inspiring tools. I do horseback riding and cycling. I love traveling. However, now under Corona, it's hard. So basically doing the outdoors activities and exercises besides my family does help me a lot. It's my stress release mechanism. So I try to do it on a weekly basis, and I try to do it with my kids to have it like as a family quality time that I spend with my kids.
Like many Palestinians that I know, they love cooking, and for them, like, cooking is a piece of art, creating an art. So I'm very curious if you like cooking, and what is your most favorite Palestinian dish?
I do cook, and I do it regularly. But this does not mean that I do truly enjoy the fact of cooking.
Okay, that's very honest. That's good.
I appreciate cooking, and I very much care about healthy food in my household. I love maqloube, the maqloube Palestinian dish. I also love msakhan, which is a very popular Palestinian dish in the northern cities of Palestine. I appreciate food. I enjoy food. However, I like to be served.
That's very good, and a very good and honest answer. Due to your career, of course, I can imagine that you had to read a lot of big books in your life. But if you had some time, are there some books that you would like to reread?
Interesting. I'll be honest with you. Yes, there are some books that I read that truly haunted my way of thinking, and I now recall and echo certain sentences or quotes regularly. I might not remember the name of the book. However, some books that I can't forget the name of the author or the title is, for example, Lean In for Women in the Workplace for Sheryl Sandberg, The Animal Farm for George Orwell, and 1984 and Diplomacy for Kissinger. Another book for Dan Shapiro is on emotions and leadership. So those are basically that truly keep coming into my life on the personal and the career level. They had really inspired me on so different levels in understanding the world, in understanding societies, in dealing with our daily challenges, if I may call it, and in countering and dealing with the realities that we face on personal and social level.
Do you like music? And if yes, then which kind of music do you like?
I love music, and I love to dance dabka. I like ABBA music, and you would find me usually playing it in my car or on my smartphone on different applications. And coming to Arabic, besides dabka, I love music coming from the Gulf, Khaliji rhyming music. So yes, I appreciate music actually. It's another way of meditating for me. It's a basic tool for my meditation strategy.
Yes. And what is your favorite, you can choose favorite quote or your life motto, whatever you prefer.
It's interesting that you asked this question, Diana. I'm sitting now in my office at the Arab American University in Rehan, and just behind me, there is a quote that I think as a life motto, and it's even much more than that because I do share it with my students on every semester. The first lecture, every semester, I share this quote with my students because it has been very motivating for me. And here I quote, it's for Confucius, and it basically says, to build a great nation, to build a great kingdom, you must tend to your own state. To build a great state, you must first tend to your own family. To build a great family, you must first cultivate yourself, and to cultivate yourself, you need to dedicate yourself to learning. So it all evolves, it's for Confucius again, and it evolves around learning, and it reminds me that no matter what position we get, no matter what title we might reach, no matter what academic degree we might earn, no matter what salary we could get to, we should dedicate ourselves to learning as a basic rule in order for us to be able to cultivate ourselves, cultivate our family, which of course goes out to our society and our nation.
Thank you. That's very interesting. It's a very, very nice quote. I will keep it for myself as well. And my last question to you, if you had a chance to go back, what would you wish to your 10 years old self? Or maybe what would you advise?
Freedom. I mean, before turning the age of 10, I witnessed the Palestinian uprising, Intifada, and then at the age of 10, exactly that was when the peace process started in the region, where hopes rose significantly. And now the incline of the hopes for peace and a negotiated solution is shocking. So I do not want my kids and the new Palestinian generations to experience what I did. So I think every 10 years old and every Palestinian, as any other human of this world, deserves freedom.
Sure. Yeah. And this is our biggest wish, let's say, for all of us. I think that's the most what we wish. And that's so important, especially that we live in this modern time when everybody is speaking about freedom. And it's a shame that there are still some regions where we don't have it in reality.
I usually use the term branding Palestine, and I get contested sometimes because the term branding is very provocative and it's very much related into business. However, I want every Palestinian and every conscious citizen of the world to help me in branding Palestine better. And to understand this term, I mean to promote what is really worth sharing about Palestine. What makes Palestine unique? I mean, what makes Palestine in the lead? Today's world order, I mean, the international relations in the world today is based on interest. States choose their relations and vote in the international forums in the past that serves their interests more than their universal values. And so from a realpolitik point of view, we truly need to accept this fact and deal with it accordingly. So the image of the victim, the image of the poor, the image of the beggar, the image of the dependent about Palestinians needs to be changed. Palestine's image needs to be promoted by shedding light on the success stories and the uniqueness of the Palestinian people under occupation. I mean, the resilient people who managed to achieve on so many levels despite the political challenges under occupation. So diplomacy is not only the official offices, it's also the public and how individuals can influence diplomacy, digital diplomacy, Twitter diplomacy, social media diplomacy. I mean, there are all new tools of modern diplomacy. It is time for the Palestinians to focus on the positive, focus on what is unique about Palestine, and decide for ourselves on how Palestine deserves to be seen, and not what the Israelis or other players decided to label Palestine with. We are a nation of hard workers, a nation of talented people, creative. We have many stories and positive, inspiring examples to share on culture, on cuisine, on sport, on literature, on dance, on music, on drama, on the role of women. So we have many brands for Palestine, and I strongly believe that we need to shed light on the unique brands that make Palestine unique. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, this, and I really hope that it's going to be more and more, because that's a shame if you see the media. There is not so much information, of course, about Palestinian people. And I mean, there are also so many intelligent people that I know that their stories are inspiring, and they actually can inspire many people in the world, because it doesn't matter on the struggle, people still achieve a lot in their life and they have very interesting lives. So thank you so much. It was very inspiring and very interesting talking to you.
Thank you.